Welcome to my YouTube channel, Nady the Coder. Today we're going to be starting the new React.js course, and we're going to be talking about the course outline in this lecture, and we're going to be talking about what we are going to cover in this React.js course and what you can expect. So basically we're going to be starting from the very scratch of the course and the tutorial bit for the very beginners, and then we'll go to some advanced level and do some practical projects in the React.js. But yeah, before talking about too much about the lecture and the course itself, let's just dive into the lecture. Prerequisites. So, what you should know before getting started on this React.js tutorial, you should have some basic knowledge of HTML. You should know about HTML, how we write our HTML pages, and what is basically HTML and all that stuff. You should have some basic knowledge of CSS. You should know some basic properties and how we add style or how we can add styles to HTML and all that. So it's a bit compulsory if you know that, but if not, then we also gonna be covering the very basic stuff. So it's not very necessary, but if you already know it, then it's gonna be a bonus for us. JavaScript. So it's really important if you're going to start with this React.js tutorials. Basically, it's a JavaScript framework. So before getting started on this tutorial, you should have some basic knowledge of JavaScript. At least you should know, the document object model, what is DOM, and how we can manipulate DOM, and what is how it forms the web page, and how it really works. You should have some basic knowledge of JavaScript. The variable declarations, loops, and all that basic stuff in JavaScript. And you should have some knowledge of JavaScript objects. You should know how to manipulate objects in JavaScript, basically how to add a property to a JavaScript object, how to remove or delete a property from a JavaScript object, and how you can access a loop through those properties in JavaScript objects. You should also have some knowledge of functions in JavaScript. What are functions in JavaScript? How we declare them? What are different types of functions that we can declare in JavaScript? For example, the functions declarations, functions expressions, and then the arrow functions itself. So these are the kind of things that you should know. So if you don't have any knowledge of JavaScript, or you want to learn some JavaScript and take some JavaScript tutorial, I already have some lectures on these basic stuff. You can go ahead to my channel and watch those videos. You should also have some knowledge of built-in functions like map and reduce and all those higher order functions. So this pretty necessary, and you'd be able to distinguish what React's offer and how we are using JavaScript in our React.js. So yeah, let's just talk about React.js now. We are studying and where we will end up. So, and who can take this course basically. So this course is basically for absolute beginners, and you shouldn't have any React.js knowledge beforehand, because we're going to be starting from very scratch, and we'll be discussing each and every component in very detailed. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. If you already have some knowledge about React and all that, and you want to polish your and knowledge and all that stuff about React and learn some advanced tools and things, then this is absolutely a good course for you as well. So you can already see intermediates who already have worked with React but want to learn something new and advanced. So we'll have different sections in this tutorial or this React.js course. In first section, we'll start from some React basics. We'll talk about why React, why we are going to learn React, and why we have to go with React instead of learning different frameworks, and how React came into being and all that stuff. And then the fundamental principles in React, and then the benefits and pros and cons of React, and then we'll talk about HTML versus JSX. What is the difference between these two rendering formats of components and all that. We'll create a small listing app or to do app, and our first section we're going to use all of those basic stuff, and we'll create a small working application based on those concepts. And then we'll manipulate DOM with React. So basically with that app, we will be manipulating the DOM, how we can add some elements or components to the to the application, how we can remove certain components, and how we can add certain components into the DOM. So yeah, the section 2 is basically about the fundamentals. We'll talk about functional components versus class-based components. So there are two kind of components that we use in React. So most of the time people are using functional components or class-based components. Why is that? You'll see that in, and once we have the hands on the on those lectures. We'll create an e-commerce store or e-commerce website that will be fully functional, and we'll be implementing a couple of features into that application. We'll be using a React router, how we can go from one page to another, for example, on certain events, and how we can redirect a user from one place to another, for example, after login, how when where to redirect a user, and on certain events like a button click or something like that. We'll be using Firebase over here as a database or backend. We will not be implementing our own backend, fully functional backend, like having our own backend or a database and all that, since it's just a React.js course. And so we'll not be touching the whole, backend stuff, and just we'll be implementing Firebase on all application. We will be using a Redux for state management over here, and how we can manage our state in React, and what is Redux, for example, how we can use it, and how we can dispatch different events from components into another components, and how the data is edited or removed or manipulated in the DOM. We will be integrating some payments into our e-commerce application, and for example, Stripe, where user can buy things from your websites and all that. And so you don't have to worry about anything here. Everything will be done from scratch. So you shouldn't have any knowledge of Firebase or React Router or Redux or Stripe payments. If you already have the basic knowledge of it, or you already have used it, that's totally fine. But yeah, for someone who never used it, there shouldn't be any issue for that, because we're going to be talking about everything from scratch. So yeah, the section 3 is basically we'll be covering the advanced topics over here. We'll be talking about CSS and JS, how we use CSS in JavaScript. So it's basically not CSS in JavaScript, but actually another standard way of implementing CSS in your JavaScript code, or inside your components. We'll talk about Redux Saga. It's basically built to a Redux, where you can send requests to the server and through Ajax, and get the data, and then update your a part of your application or component in an application. We'll talk about hooks. What are hooks? How we can get different kind of hooks in React.js. What are basically hooks, and the concept of hooks. So now, if you're gonna work with the React.js, or if you already have worked with React.js, you might be familiar with hooks. So it's been used a lot in JavaScript, in React.js. So you must have a knowledge of hooks, and how we can create our own custom hooks, and what are the built-in hooks that we will cover in this tutorial. We'll talk about Context API, how Context API really works. So React has this internal state management Context API that we can pass different data between the components, from the child components to the parent component, and all that data flows through the Context API. What it does and how it really works, and we'll talk about that as well. We'll be covering another topic over here, that is GraphQL. So we'll be using GraphQL in order to make our request and create our endpoints and all that. So we'll be talking about React Query as well over here. So we have different tools for managing our state in an application and the React application. We talked about Redux, we talked about Redux Saga, we talked about Context API, and also we can use a React Query. That is a declarative way of calling different APIs, and and managing your state in your React application. So that's going to be a plus point. So you're going to be learning a lot of different techs and tools in this tutorial. So make sure that you follow along all of the videos, and yeah. Then the last but not least, we'll talk about performance optimization. So if you're working with React, you should have a very concrete knowledge of how you can optimize your application on performance level, because there are a lot of re-rendering happenings, and you wouldn't want that, and sometimes it leads you to performance issues, and it takes longer than expected. So we'll do some performance optimization in our application as well. We'll talk about some progressive web apps over here as well. And last, we'll be talking about testing, how we can test our application just like we do in JavaScript using Mocha or other libraries. So we can also test our React application, React components. So we can use Jest and some tools like that in order to test our application. So yeah, this is basically the course outline of the React.js, and what are the topics that we are going to be covering in this tutorial and all that. So make sure that you follow along, and please like and share the video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel and push the bell icon in order to get the new updates and the videos that I upload. So yeah, until then, I'll see you in the next lecture.